Dr. Phil Wolfson and Sunny Strasburg. Welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, it's really great to have this opportunity to meet you and to speak with you. And I should let people know that I have a surprise co-moderator today, my son, Jonathan Van Nuys, and he'll be participating in this interview as well. So I'm really thrilled about it. And the overall focus of our get together will be psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And both of you guests have our major stars in that arena and are extremely productive, have lots of irons in the fire. And one of them that I am interested in and becoming aware of is Indra'sNet organization. What is Indra'sNet? And you'll have to make up your mind who's going to talk.
I want to give it to Phil because he describes it so beautifully.
Okay, great.
It comes out of an ancient Indian concept. So Indra'sNet is about the connection of all beings in the world. And each being is a jewel. And that jewel lights up to the outside world and lights up to the inside world of self. And the jewels are all connected. So it's a profound kind of way of looking at our interconnected being in the best sense of that. And, you know, in the world of jewels, there are all kinds of jewels, and there are ones that shine brightly and ones that shine moderately and ones that are blacked out because of, as I say, bad behavior. And our work together is to bring people together in what Sunny will talk about as the sharing group within Indra'sNet. And Indra'sNet comes out of the ketamine experience that we're doing as psychedelic psychotherapy and the MDMA experience that we've been doing separately, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But the ketamine experience is the only legal psychedelic experience available. And because of COVID and because of the limitations of training people adequately to be psychotherapists, Sunny and I looked at the world suffering, which is so intense right now.
Yeah,
and
I'll
so
say.
Converse, and so across the board, not just COVID, but poverty, people drowning wholesale in the Mediterranean, escaping war, war everywhere, and a demoralization and a kind of reversion from some of the caring, sharing, loving values that we were trying to instill in through the 60s on. A kind of reversion that's so disconcerting, especially to people of my age, but to people in general. So we realized this and we said, well, based on my experience, I'd lost my oldest son to leukemia some years ago, and I had been running groups with Jerry Jampolsky's Center for Attitudinal Healing. And
I know Jerry. Yeah.
Jerry's been very close. So after my son died, I was running groups for kids and who had lost siblings and parents. And there was a methodology that Jerry had, which was awkward and I didn't always agree with it. And what we've done is modify and create a module, a methodology, which we think is applicable worldwide. It's not psychedelic. It's a facilitated group of 6 to 10 participants for free, sponsored by our Ketamine Research Foundation. And its attempt is to create a sharing concept, a sharing concourse with people in the group, so that expression of feeling, so that expression of trauma is heard and shared. And the wonderful wealth of experience that people have in that kind of a group leads to a relief to some extent of post-traumatic stress disorder, of just the sense of being alone in the world. And so we've started to create that. We've done our first module to create a training group for facilitators, and we're trying to do this all over the world. So we're in coalition with the Chopra Foundation now, and we're in coalition with ICEERS, which is a wonderful organization in Spain dedicated to plant medicines. And they're going to translate it into Spanish, and we're going to try and send this out into as many languages as we can, because it's a replicable model with principles and basic rules for how to be in our hour and a half, 6-session long group.
Okay, let me get Sunny in here.
Please.
Sunny, are you two co-founders of Indra'sNet?
Yes, Phil and I were, it was when the pandemic was really heating up and everything was shutting down. And, you know, we were talking about wanting to get all these studies that we've been working on out into the public, and it was just impossible to get the training done. And it just felt like this urgent need to get people help with trauma. I'm a trauma therapist, and I was seeing all kinds of trauma being exacerbated with the pandemic, with the social isolation of the pandemic. And so the sharing groups were really an offering to be an antithesis to the social isolation. The thing I love about these sharing groups that I think is really exciting is that they're highly accessible. We're having them run not necessarily by licensed mental health practitioners. So we're creating trainings for facilitators. So these groups aren't therapy per se, but they're therapeutic in the effect that they have on the deep witnessing and sharing. And the idea behind.
What if some of what if some of my listeners are interested in getting involved, either as in a leadership role or as participants?
Yeah, we have a beautiful website that has all kinds of information on it, and there are forms that you can fill out online to be a participant in a sharing group. You can apply to become a facilitator of a sharing group, donate. The website is Indra'sNetCoalition.org, and Indra'sNet is without an apostrophe.
You want to spell it, Sunny?
Sure. And I'm wondering, you could probably put a link with the podcast, maybe.
Yes,
but
I will do that. It'll be on the podcast site. Let's get Jonathan in here, because Jonathan, I'm under the impression that actually you've been involved in one of those groups.
Yes, I was lucky enough to be a participant very recently. And it was, it's a unique time because we're going through this collective suffering, as you both mentioned, worldwide. And we were also in this country going through the election, and that brought up a lot of anxiety. And for me, it was a great anchor through those weeks that we did the sharing group on Monday nights, to check in, to listen in a deep way, to have the opportunity to share, to voice our anxieties, traumas, hopes, fears. It came together really beautifully. And I think the consensus at the end was that we wished we could keep going. So I'm excited for the project, and I look forward to more.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, we're hoping that you'll become a facilitator, Jonathan.
I was thinking, I was thinking about that yesterday. Yeah, and how I could fit that in. Thank you.
Yeah. I'd be curious.
The other way, David, to reach it is through Ketamine Research Foundation, which is the sponsor. So we're fundraising to make this free to participants and to pay people as facilitators, 2 facilitators per group, the same money all over the world, wherever people join in as facilitators. And so there's a kind of democratization of the work, and a format that we will train people in, and that is really, I think, applicable to either translation or ethnic realities that require some change in the nature of it. We're working with people. So we're just getting it out, but it's very exciting to do.
I want to mention your book. Jonathan loaned me a copy of your book. I've only had it for a short time, wasn't able to read it, certainly, but went through the table of contents, and it's a marvelous book. It's called The Ketamine Papers, and I want people to know about that. Anybody who's interested in ketamine, the research, the history, the practice, everything about it, dosage issues, etc. I highly recommend that book, and maybe that's a place for us to begin to dig in some more, since you mentioned that ketamine-assisted therapy is the only one that's currently legal in this country. Um, Aside from the fact that that's the only one that's currently legal, why ketamine? What are its unique properties or advantages that lend itself to your work?
Well, I'm in my office, and right behind me is one of our two rooms in which we do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. A young woman with terrible coccygeal pain and emotional distress is receiving her first experience of ketamine. In this format, we use sublingual lozenges. And what that does is it enables a kind of break from ordinary mind. So here you are being you, David. You do a ketamine experience and you leave that to whatever extent you're sensitive to the medicine, to whatever extent you receive a dose of the medicine. And you have an interval period in which you're journeying. And it's a very powerful psychedelic. It's not a minor league. So we have a gradient of experience so that people who are relatively inexperienced enter that world gently, or enter that world into a full journey. And in that journey, which lasts about an hour, hour and 15 minutes, there's a break from who you are over here. So a depressed person who comes into that journey, okay.
Do
So
we
it's
know
like
where
a
that's coming from?
fire alarm on our end.
Here.
You have nothing burning, but Sonny, pick it up. Let me see what I.
Okay. Can you
Yeah.
mute? Phil, can you mute? Or not?
I can turn off his mic for a bit if that's an issue.
Yeah.
Why don't you pick it up, Sonny?
I do ketamine assisted therapy in my practice in Salt Lake as well. And I use lozenges. And then there's another method, intramuscular injection, that I use at my retreats.
Okay, I'm gonna turn off his mic.
Can you still hear it when I mute my mic? Because now I'm wondering if it's coming
Yes.
from
No, I'm not hearing it. Jonathan, you have had some personal experience with ketamine-assisted therapy on both sides, as a subject and as a therapist. Maybe you could just say a little bit about your experience of it.
Sure. For me, ketamine was quite transformative, as you know. I was in maybe the second year of my career as a nurse practitioner, working at an HIV clinic, and I had started to develop a facial neuropathy, so a shooting nerve pain up the side of my face. Started slowly and was increasing in severity to the point that it was hard to think. And I need my brain to be sharp for my clients, for my work.
Right.
And unfortunately, all of the standard treatments for that are usually anticonvulsants or antidepressants. And getting off and on the psychoactive meds can be really difficult, especially when you're trying to work full-time plus. And so I would start things and then stop them, and it was just kind of throwing me into a chaos, and was dizzy and tired. And I actually got to the point where I had to go on disability because I couldn't work. And I had worked so hard for this career for almost a decade. And I grew quite depressed, not being able to work, probably more in hindsight than I realized at the time. And I'm quite paralyzed by that depression, thinking I can't live my passion. So eventually I was referred to a neurologist, and she suggested initially a lidocaine infusion, which I hadn't heard of. So I received a lidocaine infusion and I felt better, but just for one day. And she said, well, I want you to try ketamine. She said, half of my patients get amazing relief, half get nothing. And I thought, what do I have to lose? So it was a 3-month wait. But I went in, I think it was for a either 48 or 72-hour continuous infusion in the hospital. They checked me in. My dad actually took me and went with me. So thank you. And so, so not the best setting to do a ketamine journey, but I had a beautiful playlist that a friend had specifically curated for me. So that helped. A lot of love and support. My family and friends knew I was in that journey. So I put in the headphones, closed my eyes, and I actually had a transformative experience. It was the first time in, I think, 6 years, 3 or 6 years, that I felt like I could remember what it felt like to be without pain. And that was healing in and of itself. And then there was also a spiritual component, and I think also a relief of that depression, a return to wholeness. It was like I remembered who I was. And I went back to work maybe a week or two later. That was in 2016, and I've been working full-time plus ever since. It wasn't a cure-all, but it was that spring back into life and back into wholeness. So I have so much respect for that medication and honor it. And now I have completed the CIIS Psychedelic-Assisted Therapy and Research Program in 2019 with Sunny. And I'm also working in the ketamine field a little bit on the side for both Healing Realm Center and Polaris Insight Center. So
Yeah,
I'm grateful
you're
to
doing
be
a lot.
part of this
Well,
field.
I'm so happy to have been a witness to all of that, and it was really a transformation. And one of the things that you wrote in your book, Phil, that struck me is you said, nobody comes back untransformed. That's a strong statement.
Well, I'm happy to make it. I mean, what happens is we're all a bit different from this. It doesn't mean that people don't return to their base. We call it the rubber band effect or characterological homeostasis. And we're all characters, and doing psychedelics isn't enough. We have to amplify that with our work in the spirit world, in the activist world, in the world of relationship. But yes, from a ketamine journey, people have such an altered state, depending on the drama of that state, that you come back, with a reference point to, I wasn't depressed, for example, during that. I journeyed. I was small. I was part of the cosmos. I, had experiences of color and light, and that's so my essential nature, which I went into with this as a depressed person, doesn't manifest in the same way. People who are very rigid and confined to obsessional structures tend to not do as well, but that's true with all psychedelic medicines.
Yeah.
That we only change partially, and we have a lot of work to do to integrate, and that's what makes ketamine-assisted psychotherapy or MDMA-assisted psychotherapy different, in the sense that practitioners of it who are being thoughtful work with people to help them bring those experiences into a lived life that manifests as difference internally and externally.
Yeah, Sonny, you mentioned that you have a specific background in relation to working with trauma, and maybe you can talk to that in terms of ketamine and trauma.
Yeah, I think I think it's important to note that ketamine is very mercurial and changes a lot with different dosages. It has a lot
Okay.
of different application. And so depending on the dose, like what Jonathan was talking about with this, like medical use is a higher dose. You can give a low dose and have a conversation with clients throughout the entire journey, and they can interact with you. I do something in my trauma practice where I use hypnosis, and I put people in this hypnotic state where they can talk to different parts of themselves. And the ketamine really opens that and facilitates that. So there's more fluidity and more openness. So it can be helpful for trauma in that, especially for clients that want to dissociate. I tend to use lower dose ketamine so that they're not just checking out like they always do, but they're really going into their trauma. And then with higher dose, you can do a journey like what Phil was referring to, where you have this, you have this, you're almost in like a shavasana. Most people are in this quiet repose. And then as they're coming out, we do integration and talk about how that relates to their trauma. And then in the day after, we revisit what they experienced in ketamine. And, you know, my original training was in Jungian depth psychology, and I feel like I'm really using that. It's almost like dream
Of
analysis
course.
as they come
Yeah.
back and, you know, and say, oh, you know, I was chased by a monster. And then, you know, and I was so afraid to turn around and look at it. And then we start talking about the trauma and how the trauma dogs them every day. And that maybe it's time to turn around and really look at it and bring it into their awareness. So ketamine really feels like an amplifier. My clients say, wow, it's like we did 10, you know, therapy sessions in one day instead of, you know, just day, you know, week after week after week. It just seems like it really potentiates therapy, and particularly, I think, trauma therapy. You know, Phil and I both, I think, have the idea that trauma underlies a lot of mental illness, that trauma is so prolific, and that's really where we usually have to go with our clients.
Yeah, I've had some guests who've maintained that everybody has trauma, and it's hard to argue against that. Uh,
I think
Well,
it's hard to get through life.
I think as a psychiatrist, I would argue against trauma being universally the cause of mental difficulty. I think trauma underlies most of mental illness, but having done this for over 50 years, there are people who have schizophrenia or have bipolar or manic disorder where trauma may trigger initially, but trauma is not cause. There are other ways in which we don't understand mental life that impact on people's well-being and how they are in the world. So trauma's principle, and for so long it was neglected and submerged under Freudian concepts. And thank goodness we're back to really understanding how trauma is formative. And trauma comes in small and big pieces. I've been writing a book called The Little Book of Big Grief, and you know, having lost a child, that's a very big experience. Some people have lost 2 or 3 children, but there are
yeah,
the small experiences that we carry of moving early in childhood, or divorce, or losing our friends, or losing an animal. One of my friends is just losing her cat, and she's deeply upset. And you know, it goes inside, and we both learn from it, and we're also impacted by it. So trauma as a source of our inner life and outer life is extremely. It's the imperative to work with.
yeah. Jonathan, did you start to say something?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, no, no. I was curious, for Sunny, I know you also do EMDR, and I know MDMA is being used in trauma, open label, and in research, and in PTSD. So where do you see the place for, what kind of client would you choose to maybe use MDMA versus ketamine? I know they're all tools versus EMDR, or all three, or a combo. What is
Great question. You know, I think that is eventually, when all of these medicines become legal, we'll have this whole new toolkit, right, where we can customize it. I think that, you know, kind of circling back to what Phil was talking about, that there is organic mental illness, and that as practitioners, I think that one of the most important things about psychedelics becoming available is the importance to properly screen clients, right? So, because some people should not use psychedelics if they have, you know, active mania or active psychosis, for example. And so I think, you know, I probably wouldn't use psychedelics at all for clients like that, and tend toward more, you know, EMDR, right? I think I've used low dose ketamine with EMDR together, and it's really, really potent for some clients if they're able to stay lucid enough to participate more with the headphones or the buzzers that they're holding, so that they don't have to coordinate eye movements. I'm trained in Gottman couples method therapy, and I think MDMA would be an incredible combined with Gottman couples therapy for couples. You know, therapeutic techniques would be great coupled with that. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting when we have everything online, what to use. Something that I really love about ketamine, no matter what psychedelic is made available, I'm going to use ketamine because it's a, you know, 1.5 hour journey. It's very digestible. the insights that my clients get are like in these bite-sized chunks so that they can really integrate it over time. You know, when we're doing psilocybin, I was just trained in with a psilocybin program, and we're looking at the FDA approving 8 hours of therapy, right? That's a long time for therapists to be completely dialed in and attuned to their clients. So, you know, that's the thing about ketamine, is that it's so great to for the therapists to maintain focus, and then also for the clients to be able to digest what comes in. So
I
I
would
think
also
I'll
think
into that
I would also think there'd be an economic advantage there
very much
because
so, very much so.
yeah, having a therapist.
We could do 2 sessions in office per person in a day. But going back to Jonathan's invoking MDMA, I have a very exciting announcement to make.
Oh, good.
Tomorrow we'll be publishing our MDMA phase 2 MAP sponsored study of life-threatening illness. So we did a study of 18 people who had 1 year or less to live in one of the most intensive MDMA psychotherapy or any psychotherapy processes. We finished it 3 years ago. And finally, it's coming out tomorrow, and we'll be sending out the link. And it's a wonderful study because people were really suffering. We lost one person to recurrent cancer. Another person is barely clinging to life. And what came out of it really, and there's an opinion piece I wrote that will be out with it, is that we really have created a large population of survivors of cancer and other life-threatening illnesses who were traumatized both by the diagnosis and the ongoing treatment, and their lives are altered not just by brain phenomena, but just by the trauma itself of going through all of that. So we're trying to put into the literature, as Bessel van der Kolk did some years ago, for attachment trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder for life-threatening illness. It's a long way to go, but I think as so many of people do survive illness and are hurt by all of that, it deserves our full attention. So this paper is focused on that, and it is the tradition of psilocybin at Hopkins with Roland Griffiths and NYU with psilocybin for life-threatening illness. And we're doing in the foundation also a ketamine life-threatening illness study, which is before in the internal review board for approval, and we hope to start in December with 5 sites. So I'm excited about all of this because I think there are so many people facing death who could be benefited by this.
So I'm assuming, you didn't explicitly say it, but I'm assuming that people were able to be more at peace with their condition.
Yeah, I think it's not just peace, but leaving aside some of the ways in which they were negatively affected and carrying stigma or carrying wounds or carrying notions I'm not the same, I can't resume life, or feeling stigma and feeling alienated or depressed and anxious, resuming life after a year, 2 years, 3 years or more of this. There are residues in people that really hurt them and inhibit their lives or keep them afraid. Just the fear of recurrence is such an enormous factor in people's lives, and what you do with that, how you live your life in fear, or you live your life not knowing you don't have cancer, for instance, in the moment, but it can return in 3 weeks. So there's a constant kind of stress that people live with.
You mentioned MAPS, which for people out there that may not know is the abbreviation for the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. Did I get that right?
Yeah, 4 psychedelic studies, yeah.
Okay, 4 psychedelic studies. And they have been an incredible force in terms of moving things along, sponsoring critical research, and moving the legal situation forward. And both of you are involved with MAPS, I guess, and have been involved in some of their research studies. Maybe you can update us on what the legal prospects are looking like at this point.
And can I piggyback onto that question as well?
Yeah.
If you could speak to. I've been curious if the pandemic is slowing down that research, because I imagine people might not be able to go in person. And I was also wondering if that's going to be a big confounder, because now there's all this new collective trauma on top of what people were working with. So if you could also.
I think MAPS has successfully continued the phase 3 study, which is the study before approval, hopefully by FDA, and it looks very good. The results of those studies have been remarkable. I think they're going to make an announcement soon about extraordinary progress in that. So I think there's a very good chance that MDMA will be rescheduled from Schedule 1, hopefully next year. And it will become available for practitioners within certain confines to be able to use MDMA alongside with ketamine. We call it the toolbox. So the toolbox has marijuana, not federally legal yet, ketamine, and we hope MDMA soon, and we hope mushroom psilocybin soon. And we're very gratified that Oregon has made psilocybin, or really mushrooms, available to a broad population, where it's not only under medical aegis, but it's available for legal use.
Yeah. Sunny, maybe you can speak to Jonathan's question. Do you,
I'm sorry.
Do you need him to remind you of what his question was?
Yeah. What were you saying, that the pandemic is slowing down the research? Definitely. I think that's a definite yes to that. I know that the research that they're doing at Aquilino and Compass Pathways has been really slowed down with the pandemic. And just, I think Phil and I are struggling with trying to figure out how to train people in person for the ketamine. So yes, definitely. And you spoke to the fact that the pandemic has exacerbated trauma, right? So we have so many more people needing help and needing these medicines, and we just can't get people trained fast enough, I don't think, to be able to roll out enough trained people for the demand.
Well, all I was alluding to is that MAPS has done a very great job, despite the COVID epidemic, of working through their phase 3 trials. So they've handled it really well, but they're finishing it up. So they deserve great credit.
Yeah. Is Indra'sNet or you two individually, are you offering services remotely during this COVID experience? And if so, what's the setup?
Our sharing groups are held on Zoom, and so they are remote, and people don't even need to be in the same town, right? As long as you're speaking the same language, you can join a sharing group. So that was a big thrust to get the sharing groups out, is just to get people therapy as soon as possible. And if you're asking about ketamine, I think Phil can speak to that.
Well, we're doing at-home ketamine. We have a model for how to do it on Zoom. Only a few of us are doing it. It's not the most fun way to go, 3 hours with someone. They need to have someone in the house. And because nausea is a problem, and we have to pre-equip people with that medicine to take care of that. But we are doing it in small numbers. And we're looking at doing groups where we pre-qualify people. It's all under a medical rubric, ketamine Schedule 3. You need to prescribe it, and then do the groups online as well through Zoom. And with the pandemic reaching such epic proportions, we're really not able to bring people together. It's really frustrating. We've trained 310 people through the foundation, but everything stopped in January. Was our last group meeting in real time. And we were supposed to start in Europe in April, and that got canned because of COVID, and we haven't been able to resume. So we're trying to figure it out. We haven't done so yet. And what's happened is that we and others are doing online training programs.
Maybe we can branch out a bit from pathology, psychopathology, to talk about issues such as creativity. And Sunny, I know that you are doing a lot in that arena, both with your Jungian background and as an artist. Jonathan referred me to one of your, I think, many websites that has a lot of your art on it. Spectacular. I would put it in the category of psychedelic art. Talk to us about that and what the role of these psychedelics might be in terms of creativity, problem solving, etc.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I was a therapist. I mean, I was an artist long before I was a therapist, and
Uh-huh.
I always felt like when I became a therapist, it all made sense to me why I was so drawn to art, because I love the psychological aspects of art, the having the viewer engage with it and have their own projective experience about about what I'm trying to
Yeah.
convey. That was always the most fun for me. So I'm doing a lot of collaborations now with my husband, who's also a painter, and now our 18-year-old daughter is joining. So the three of us are painting these enormous canvases together, and
What fun.
it's so much fun. But yeah, I mean, psychedelics definitely link the brain up in ways to help us think about things in nonlinear, more open-minded ways. So psychedelics potentiate, I think, the creative process
Psychedelics
incredibly. Yeah.
inflame the imagination so that creative people open new doors for themselves, or people who are not creative often just start throbbing with the desire to become creative,
Wow.
take up various things.
I I wrote a paper about the personality trait of openness, and that correlates to more 5-HT2A receptor sites in the brain. And so people that tend toward more openness in their personality tend to have more visual and fantastical experiences on psychedelics. And so the paper I wrote was really that maybe we should start screening people with higher scores on openness before we give them psychedelics in these studies, because maybe that would help our outcomes, right?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think I've always felt like I have a really, really high level of openness. Even before I ever had psychedelics, I was painting crazy, wild things from my dream life. So I think it just opened it up even more.
Yeah.
My experience is that it really uh, opens, as Sonny was saying, to spontaneity and to trusting intuition, in the deep sense of intuition, so that the interference with judgment and ratings and worries about the audience reduce in terms of how one functions in the world. So
Yeah.
the opportunities to be creative verbally, artistically, etc., grow enormously with psychedelic experiences.
Yeah.
Now, you know, someone who does an ayahuasca set is just inflamed with visual experiences that are incomparable, and to a lesser extent, that's true with ketamine and psilocybin. But you know, all of these substances lead to an opening, to a creative outburst internally, which is reflected outward in expression.
You know, I
Well, I
mentioned
think
your,
I'm sorry.
this is
I just wanted
okay.
to add on to that, that I think that all kinds of creativity, right? So not just art or music or writing, but I think psychedelics really open people's mind to be to question things that we've been taught, our governments or or our socialization, or being more creative in our interactions with other people, more compassionate, more open. So I think there are all kinds of ways that these medicines make us more creative and open, besides the arts specifically.
Yeah.
And that,
Jonathan,
I assume you're going to post a link to the artwork, and I would urge everybody to check it out. It is amazing, beautiful, spectacular work.
okay,
And
you should send me that link again after we get off,
When people look
and
at
I'll
the
do that.
Indra'sNet Coalition website, they'll see Sonny's contribution in art to make that a wonderful place to go and learn about what we're doing. Would you mind if I told you a bit about our research activities from the
Uh,
Ketamine Research
would love to
Foundation? I think
hear.
you'll find them
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, please.
One of the things we're about to publish, if I ever finish the paper, is a study, an orthodox study we did on the expression of ketamine in breast milk. So we had 4 women at 2 different intramuscular dosages of ketamine come in pump milk over a period of time so that we could look at the safety of ketamine as a primary antidepressant, potentially for postpartum depression and things like it, so that women didn't have to stop breastfeeding. We're about to put that into the literature and put that into the world. And it's wonderfully supportive of women continuing to breastfeed infants safely after a short period of stopping doing so. So that ketamine, as we move it into postpartum depression treatment, does not interfere with the relationship between mother and child. It's safe, unlike SSRIs and other substances, which may well be safe, but are constantly bathing an infant in medicine, and we don't know the long-term effects. And many women have trouble making a decision about going on antidepressants when they're very depressed and need something. So we think this will add to ketamine's presence in the world. One of the other studies we're beginning is with veterans and ketamine, and we've come to the understanding that what we want to do is train facilitators who are veterans, so that when veterans come into our groups, which will be Zoom or hopefully reality groups eventually, that veterans encounter people who know about combat and being in the military directly, along with one of our facilitators. And we're doing this program on conscious dying, conscious living, and constantly developing an understanding of ketamine through our international network that we've created of ketamine providers. A lot going on. We ask you to look at Ketamine Research Foundation.
Yeah, yeah, that's exciting work to hear about.
That is
We
exciting.
also did 7 days Burning Man. For those of you who are excited about Burning Man, couldn't occur and probably won't occur next year either. And my son Helix, who is a burner, created a virtual Burning Man called the Infinite Playa, and we had a week of programming, which is on our website, with great stuff on meditation and psychedelics from wonderful people in the Buddhist and other worlds. Great audiovisual stuff if you want to watch 75 minutes uninterrupted of amazing audiovisual materials, lectures, all kinds of things. Go to Ketamine Research Foundation and you'll see the listing for this, and you can just use it for your edification. It's really wonderful stuff.
Okay,
I would
great.
emphasize that. Yeah, it was called the K-Dome. And I watched in preparation for this a few interviews with both of you in the K-Dome, and it was wonderful. So great resource. Speaking of moving ketamine into different populations and psychedelics in general, I was curious because in my understanding, there's not much research in people over 65 with psychedelics. And do you have any information or aware of any research using ketamine in people over 65 or other psychedelics, and the safety profile of that, or precautions that we should keep in mind?
It's a good question, Jonathan. Thanks for asking. So we published a paper in 2019 of 235 subjects, patients within our clinical format, and there was a significant percentage of people over 65 in that. So you can look at that, and we're collecting material for a new one. I don't think it's particularly different. It's a really safe substance. The main issues are cardiac issues, increase in blood pressure and heart rate, which are transient. So you have to look out for that, so as not to, hurt people who may be stroke prone or who have had infarction. So you have to be careful with cardiovascular in terms of blood pressure. But otherwise, it's safe. We've gone up to 87 is our oldest person who used it safely. And so we probably have around, over 65, probably 70 or 80 people in my own practice who have safely used ketamine in full levels of it. I'm 77, I safely use ketamine.
That's great. And somebody who has had a stroke, if their blood pressure were well managed, would you go ahead with the ketamine, or would you prophylactically give them a blood pressure medication beforehand?
I wouldn't prophylactically do that. We have inclusion criteria for when someone's blood pressure is too high. The elevations tend to be 20 to 30 millimeters and last a few hours at most. And almost all psychedelics do it. MDMA does it as well. So those precautions in the MAP studies, people have been excluded who didn't conform to the blood pressure requirements. So yeah, I would be very careful. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
There's a lot of interest these days in microdosing, and I'm wondering what perspectives you people have on that phenomenon.
Well, Jim Fadiman does a wonderful talk on our K-Dome thing. Everything there is to know about microdosing is in an hour interview that he and I did on our website. And the protocols for that are there. Both his and Paul Stamets is referred to, who is, the Mushroom King, and
Right.
has his own protocol for it. The evidence remains anecdotal. There are attempts at studies, but to verify, but the evidence is in the anecdotal world is overwhelming for many, many people, not just having wellness experiences, but relief from migraines, relief from all manner of difficulties. So it's worth exploring.
Okay.
Has anybody looked at, because I'm aware of a lot of people looking at microdosing with LSD and psilocybin, has anybody looked at, to your knowledge, microdosing with ketamine or explored that?
Well, microdosing tends to be with both LSD and mushrooms are the most common things. There are people who have done Lidocaine and Low Dose. We don't think that ketamine is effective at a microdose. We don't know, but I don't think that ketamine is worthwhile to microdose it. Small dosing. We're exploring low dosing.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're really exploring that's very interesting is ketamine in low dose, where it's effective as an anxiety agent. We think more prominently, more effectively than benzodiazepines like Valium and Xanax and those. And we'll be doing some studies on that near term.
Oh, great.
As we begin to kind of wrap it up here, maybe you can speak about the outlook for the future. I think you've touched on that already in many ways, but what are your
Sonny has a longer future than I do, so maybe you could.
Okay.
Who knows?
Okay.
I'm getting pretty crazy on the mountain bike lately, so.
Oh.
Well, in terms of what we're doing with Indra'sNet, we're really looking to expand Indra'sNet to be a global outreach program. So we would love to see sharing groups all over the world. And, and with it in mind to continue ketamine, to further ketamine in the world and make, as we roll out more research, I think people will be more habituated and open to ketamine, and hopefully we can get it legalized and, available to everyone. So I have this vision of these sharing groups being, as ubiquitous as Alcoholics Anonymous groups, where anywhere you are in the world, you can join a sharing group and get assistance and get some, a free way to connect with other people.
Oh.
And then hopefully from that, we'll be able to refer people to ketamine-assisted therapy who look like they could use it and need it. And then as more psychedelics come online, we'll be able to refer people to those resources as well.
So I go back to the 80s, and Sasha Shulgin and people like Rick Doblin and I were close in the 80s. And at that point in our nascent practitioner group, we saw this as a revolution. Psychedelic psychotherapy was going to change the whole parameter, the whole way of thinking about doing psychotherapy and doing psychiatry, because it's a positive step. It's not a negative step. We're not restraining. We're encouraging people to have exploration, pleasure, understanding, growth. We're not drugging people. We're giving people an opportunity to know themselves And that's a revolution. And for therapists working with people 3 hours at a time for ketamine, or 7, 8 hours for mushrooms, psilocybin and MDMA, it's a chance to be a very different person in the work, more self-revealing, more honest, more open, and more glorious. So one of the things we say to people who are coming on board learning about psychedelic psychotherapy is, you're going to have a good time. It's not like sitting here with a, saying, what does that mean? Or what do you mean by that? Or say more. It's a real experience of contact with human beings. And in that great intimacy, there's a revolution in terms of how we help people, and how we help people explore minds in a much more open and dynamic kind of way. So I think psychedelic psychotherapy is the wave of the future. And I think it's here and now in some ways. And we really want to develop it. And we're so excited about it. I love my work. I've been doing this work for 55 years now. And these are very good times to do this work.
Yay. That's such a great spirited wrap up that I think this is a good place for us to wrap it up. So Dr. Wolfson and Sonny Salzberg and son Jonathan, I want to thank you guys for being with us on Shrink Wrap Radio today.